Welcome back to Loose Talk. We're here this week with less than 2 weeks to go before the presidential election in one of the swingiest of swing states, where really the race is too close to call. Colorado is a particularly interesting swing state because the base of both parties is so strongly represented here. For the Republicans, you've got a very strong Christian population, and for the Democrats, well, there's a fast rising Hispanic population in Colorado in places like Denver and Pueblo, but also, of course, a very, very strong representation amongst the young. Now, I came through Colorado a lot during the 2008 campaign, and more than almost anywhere else, you could really feel the level of enthusiasm, the participation of volunteers, the sense of huge change being around the corner surrounding the Obama campaign. This time round, it doesn't feel anything like that. It's really night and day. Spend any time on the campus of the University of Colorado in Boulder, and you definitely get that impression.
Well, I'm for Obama, and I remember just there's a lot of hope. I think people are still committed to voting, but I think that just kind of that like hopefulness that 2008 had that was so overwhelming just isn't exactly true now.
You know, you feel excited about the future, but then when the future comes, it just doesn't feel, it's not the same motion, you know. You're not having the same emotion as you did back then. But I wish I could feel the way I used to feel.
In contrast, amongst Republicans, and particularly amongst social conservatives, the mercury is high this time round.
I think generally evangelical Christians, Protestants, conservative Catholics, evangelicals, Pentecostals, are more engaged in the election than any time that I can remember. I've been involved personally in elections for the last 25 general elections here, literally for half a century. I've run for office many times myself. I'm close to people on both sides of the aisle, and I've just never seen church people coming forward in the numbers that they are this year.
So really the critical question for the Obama campaign is whether the growing political participation amongst Latinos in states like Colorado can make up for the drop-off in enthusiasm amongst the young and educated.
The state of Hispanic enthusiasm is relatively high, actually, perhaps surprisingly high. It was down a bit during the summer, and then the directive from the Department of Homeland Security from the Obama administration, which allowed for folks to stay in this country and attain undergraduate degrees and work permits, seemed to lead to a bump up in enthusiasm. So in Colorado in particular, we're looking at more than half of Latinos in some recent polls suggesting that they're more enthusiastic even in 2012 than in 2008.
And so as we head into the final few days of this razor-thin race, it really boils down to a question of street by street, block by block, which campaign is better at turning out its base. Of course, 4 years ago, it was a very different prospect. Behind me, you see the mile-high Invesco Stadium, where President Obama, well then Senator Obama, in his acceptance speech, made one of the most soaring and highfalutin addresses of his career. Then really was an election about inspiration, hope, and a surge of enthusiasm amongst the young, amongst African Americans, and amongst many different demographic groups. And the main deciding factor this time round is going to be which campaign's support base dislikes the other candidates more. Our odd moment of the week this week comes from Boca Raton, which played host to the third and final debate. Now, President Obama started the debating season disastrously here in Denver with a very disappointing performance that really shifted the race in Romney's direction. He recovered a little bit in New York for the second debate, and by the third, he was back on form with some of the wittiest zingers he's produced in the whole campaign.
You mentioned the Navy, for example, and that we have fewer ships than we did in 1916. Well, Governor, we also have fewer horses and bayonets because the nature of our military's changed. We have these things called aircraft carriers where planes land on them. We have these ships that go underwater, nuclear submarines. And so the question
But this election is going to be decided on the economy, not foreign policy. So it's doubtful that Obama's sharply improved debating performance is going to have much impact at all. See you next week on Loose Talk.